Welcome back. Today, we have an extra special treat for everybody. My guest today is a pharmacist, but not just that. Like me, he is a holistic healer. He is the owner of the Herbal Path. He has been affecting our community here in the Seacoast in a positive manner for a long time now. I can't wait to get into it with him today. We're going to talk supplements. We're going to talk herbs. We're going to talk away from Big Pharma. Giddy up. My guest today, John Moro.
Wow. Thank you so much for that introduction. It's very honoring for me to be here. So thank you, Steve, for having me on the show. And it's great to finally get some time to have this conversation.
Yeah, brother. It's good to sit back down with you and to share this space with another pharmacist, somebody who has had the same training and degree that I have, but sees the world in a similar way that I do and sees pharmacy in a similar way that I do. You have a pretty incredible story. Somebody to come to be owning the Herbal Path. You would think that maybe they were always into herbs, or they were something that they were always into supplements. That's why they went to pharmacy school, is because this was their belief. But that's not you, right?
No, not at all. In fact, before 2012, 2013, I had no knowledge, or virtually no knowledge, of herbs and different plant combinations. It was something that just sort of happened. But looking back on it now, it really all felt as though it happened for a reason. There was this sort of cataclysmic force pulling me in that direction, even though I didn't see it at the time. Looking back on it now, I do.
The universe is funny that way. Sometimes the world's already ready for you, but you're not ready for it. You're not quite ready to step into your power, step into the energy that you see yourself. Can you tell me how that happened for you? Like, what do you mean? What was going on in 2013?
Yeah, so I think to do this and to do it right, I have to take you back to the time when I was becoming a pharmacist, or having the idea and iteration of this is what I want to do with my life. Because what drove me into pharmacy was a very specific thing, a specific event. And I think that specific event is also what drove me to step away from community pharmacy as we traditionally know it and move into the world of herbal medicine. So when I was going through school, I was always fascinated by physiology and the human body, right? And I remember, kind of taking the track, if you would, through exercise physiology, physical therapy. I was actually going to school to become a physical therapist, right? And right around that time, massive heart problems for my dad. Had to have heart surgery, dealing with all these different medications, coming out of those treatments and those surgeries, ended up getting put on just this laundry list of medicine. And it was so confusing to him, figuring out when do I take this, and what do I take, and why am I taking it? And being his son, I was kind of trying to help him through all that, but also got to watch the confusion, got to watch the frustration, right? And that totally disrupted my path. I was going to become, again, physical therapist, go exercise physiology route. And I was just fascinated by all these medicines and their supposed ability to keep him alive and to help him. And I fell in love with pharmacology, right? The idea that we could give someone something and it could help make them better, right? So that propelled me into pharmacy. The intention being, I want to make a difference. I want to help people, really help them get better. And then fast forward through pharmacy school, I'm getting towards the end, right? I'm going out on remember we had to go on clinical rotations and internships, and you're kind of making the rounds and deciding what you want to do. And I remember getting out there, and I'd just come off of a hospital rotation, as clinical as you could get, the guidelines, vancomycin dosing, pharmacokinetic calculations, the drill. And then there was this other elective rotation that I almost didn't even pick. The reason I picked it was because my wife, Setare, she's from the Persian culture, Persian background, and they work with a lot of herbs traditionally. She's like, John, an herbal medicine elective, that's really interesting. You should do it, right? So she was kind of like
Was she your wife at the time?
No, fiance.
Okay, but she was your fiance. She was already committed. I was about to say maybe you were just trying to impress the lady.
No. But we're kind of going in that direction, right?
Yeah.
And then it was just this moment of, wow, okay, I'll do it. It's something different. I've always been interested in trying different things, right? But I didn't have a lot of interest in it going in. I almost felt like, okay, we'll see what we can see here. There was a lot of skepticism because, as you know, you're taught in pharmacy school, supplements, you got to be really careful. They're not regulated. Maybe you just want to stay away from all of them. I'd encountered physicians on my rotations who were like, dietary supplements, oh, those are bad. Stay away from them. Herbs, we don't know enough. We can't use them. So anyway, I start this rotation, right? And I remember the first day like it was yesterday. And I walked into the Herbal Path, and it was just so different, the feeling that I got. Immediately, somatosensory, smelling the essential oils, lavender, lemongrass, mint, it's very activating but soothing too. And then there were kind of like these chimes that they had up. So I was hearing almost like a wind chime effect. They were playing a very gentle classical music over the loudspeaker. It felt unlike any other pharmacy that I'd been in. Because pharmacies in general, up until that point for me, had been places where people rush around in a state of frenetic energy, trying to fill orders or trying to deliver on some sort of outcome or timeline, right? And feeling very chaotic. That was the opposite of what I was feeling at that moment. And then I went over to this herb counter, and they had like a little mini apothecary set up with all the herbs and glass containers. And there was a gentleman over there who looked unlike any pharmacist that I'd seen. He had a flannel shirt on. He had some leaves on the flannel shirt. And there was herb dust all around him. He was like making a blend of teas, right? And there I am in my white coat with a tie on. I've got my spit polished shoes. I took my appearance really seriously as a pharmacy intern.
Oh yeah.
You never know what
100%.
rotation
I was the same
is
way.
going to be the
Look good,
job
feel good,
rotation.
play good.
Yeah.
Yep.
So going in there and just feeling, the feeling was different though. And I remember meeting him and asking him, oh, do I need to wear my white coat? He said, no, that could trigger some people. And I didn't know what that meant at the time. But through the course of that rotation, right? So that first day, after he made the tea blend, he took me out into a field. So he's like, first day, field trip. We're going to go see where medicine is made. I'm like, what in the world? But I was just so interested, so intrigued. And he took me out into this field, and I sat down. And he had me sit down. And he said, close your eyes and listen. And I just was hearing birds. I heard sort of there was long grass all around us, right? So I was hearing kind of the rustling of the long grass. And then he said, okay, open your eyes. And now this is what the earth feels like. This is what connectedness feels like. And then we proceeded to go on a walk. And he would identify these medicinal plants that were all around us. He talked about dandelion. He talked about horsetail. He talked about lemon balm. He talked about garlic. It was just so interesting the way he was weaving back and forth between energy and resonance and biochemistry. I was fascinated. The rotation was 6 weeks, right, as they tend to be. And coming out of that 6 weeks, I felt like my life was changed. There was another part of it, though, and this is why I told you my original reason for why I got into pharmacy. Up until that point, I had not seen a lot of interaction from patients in a positive manner. Typically, when I saw patients in community pharmacy or hospital pharmacy, they would be people that were declining in some way. you know? They would be put on medications as a result of some condition, and then they would start to step into this period of decline, you know, chronic disease. And here I was seeing the opposite. In the Herbal Path, patients were coming in and saying things like, wow, my life is different now. I was able to get off of that Cymbalta, or I was able to get off of that Zoloft. Or, do you take hugs because I'm regular again? Stuff like that just made me feel like we're really helping people here. And I didn't encounter the anger, the frustration, the ire that was typically directed at providers that I'd encountered, that I'd been a part of at certain points. Now, I've had patients scream at me, yell at me, accuse me, blame me. And you chalk it up to, okay, they're in pain and I get it. But what if there's something more at work here? What if it's the intentionality of it? What if it's the way that medicine is practiced? And here I was seeing something totally different. And I'm by no means anti-conventional medicine. You know, I support what providers do, what practitioners do. I think they're working in a system and they have to work in that system, right? They don't know another way. But as a student, seeing that other way, I knew I wanted to be a part of it. And when Ron Stock, the gentleman who owned and founded the Herbal Path, right, at the end, I got to sit down with him and give him feedback on how the internship went. And I said it was magical. I said it was transformative. I said I wanted to come back. He told me, you can't right now. You have to practice as a pharmacist in conventional medicine before you will know how broken it is. And he wouldn't hire me coming out of school. And I just remember this sense of frustration, like, here I found my dream, and I really want to work there, and I can't yet. It wasn't time. But remember, you know, we're all led in different ways down a path, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I felt up until that point, my path had been very conventional, very academically driven. And here it was.
John, can I ask you?
Yeah.
You were a smart guy in school? Like, you know, you were crushing crushing classes, or
Straight A's.
Straight A's.
Know, like I
every lecture?
loved it.
Yeah,
Loved
okay.
it. You know,
Giddy
I
up.
was the nerd, you know,
Yep.
the class nerd, and they would always try to steal my notes.
Yeah, thanks for the
and, you
notes,
know,
brother.
Yeah. Anyway.
I wasn't stealing them. There was it was an energy exchange, right? There's always
An energy exchange.
It's an energy
Yeah.
exchange, you know. And I was the guy who was, you know, partying and leading social stuff and doing that, and also doing well in school, and also, you know, leading fundraisers and, you know, being very socially active in the school in terms of like bringing groups together and people together.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a ton of value in that.
The connector.
The connector, right? Yeah. And so, but they would come to my parties. The people we shared notes with, they were all my friends. So I was never taken advantage, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And you know, when you're young, it's tough. You're still trying to find your niche in the world. But I'd just gotten comfortable with that. You know, I'd gotten very comfortable with, okay, I'm the book smart person, the academic. I enjoy it. It's good. I feel accomplishment. I feel like, but again, the goal was always there. I want to learn enough so I can help people like my dad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you know, I saw this clear way to do it with what the Herbal Path was doing. You know, here were pharmacists that had time to talk to people, that had time to counsel. There wasn't a constraint on them, you know, oh, you need to get the prescription done, or the queue is going to turn red and the district manager is going to get angry. And there wasn't any of that. And it just felt magical. And then to be told, no, it's not time, was really hard for me. It was hard to deal with that as a student, but also just as a person who felt like, you know, I'd found my way. And it almost involved a bit of disconnection now from the Herbal Path in turning to, okay, well, maybe that's not meant to be. Maybe he's right. You know, I need to go conventional pharmacy. I need to see how that all works out. And I proceeded to work for a conventional pharmacy chain that gives you a lot of opportunities, but it's opportunities along a very narrow highway. Right? You know, you're going to go in one direction and you can't really think outside the box. You're a cog in somebody else's machine, right? The way you practice, the way you talk, the way you act is all very closely regulated.
What do you think?
The way you think. That's okay, I guess, in their sphere. But I threw myself with reckless abandon into working for that chain and giving it my all. And I got my MBA and took all their leadership classes, and remember becoming a pharmacist, a pharmacy manager, a district manager, training even to be a region director at some point. And the higher I went, the less impact I felt like I was having. The further away I felt like I was getting from why I got into pharmacy to begin with, And
John, you're a guy who like knew you had this origin story of, your dad being sick and you were academically smart, and then you found something that you could use that energy into, and you were like, oh, giddy up, let's chase this. And then
Sure.
you kind of feel along the way that it's kind of manipulative and it's not as real as they say it is. Why, if these herbs can help to treat this, then why aren't we studying this a little bit more? Why is this one slide on a lecture? Did you have any of those questions while you were in school?
I did, especially for the board exam, right? Because they were kind of doing these things to help us prepare for our boards and prepare for the NAPLEX, and they do like a NAPLEX review at the end.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot more involved now from my understanding of it from my students. But what was happening back then was very much like, maybe 1 week of board review, and then, we wash our hands of it and you're out there and you're going to go practice, right? After you take your boards. Well, there was one day where they talked about complementary alternative medicine. And I remember it was very brief and totally kind of glossing over or glancing the surface versus what I had learned at the Herbal Path. And I remember thinking during that session, this is so basic and this is so boring almost. And it's not even capturing the essence of what they're trying to do, what plants are capable of doing. It was just more like looking at a plant almost as a drug. And you can't look at a plant and equate it to a pharmaceutical. A lot of pharmaceuticals have their origin in plants, right? And that's great. But the thing is, if I take just CBD by itself, I'll use CBD as an example, right? To connect with cannabis. If I take CBD by itself, I have to use a lot more of it to have a given therapeutic effect than if I take all of the cannabinoids together in something like a full spectrum formula, right? So the whole plant together works differently in a person than taking an isolated extract, which is how we think of a lot of medication, right? It's one molecule, maybe it's two, maybe it's three, but we're taking it in isolation to have a very specific effect on our metabolism. Versus a lot of plants, it's more about helping the body get back into balance, helping us get back to homeostasis, right? That balanced physiologic set point. So you can't really think of herbal medicine and draw all of these parallels to conventional medicine because the two are fundamentally so very different. So very different.
Yeah, I want to touch on that because when I talk about traditional pharmacy and that, like how we were educated, I talk about it in that I'll say that 10 to 15, maybe 20% of drugs are good that they've been invented, and it's incredible that we can use them in acute situations.
Sure.
In an acute situation and end of life, pharmaceuticals, baby, bring them. Bring them.
Yep.
Again and again. And before I used to just think it was just for acute. And then I lost my mom and went through cancer. And I was like, oh, wow, this is something cool that if we can have guardrails on this and it doesn't get out to the other parts of the population that doesn't need it, this is a really wonderful thing.
Yeah.
That, fentanyl, the hardest, benzodiazepines, the hardest of the drugs that people can get addicted to. I saw those be beneficial in my mom at end of life. And I said, okay. And I know that those drugs are very beneficial in acute phases. So it's almost like there should be some type of separation where we have, we're treating acutely and we treat acutely with these pharmaceuticals, these isolated compounds that we've created, isolated molecules that we've taken a lot from plants. And then understanding a different model to stay as healthy away from chronic disease is to stay in balance. And that involves so many different things, food, herbs, supplements, making sure that all of your nutrition levels are active and leveled, and movement. I think movement and moving our bodies and love, expression, all that stuff is also vital to that balance. And we don't look at that within traditional pharmacy at all.
No. Acute versus chronic, I think, is very important, right? And I don't want to give people the wrong idea. I'm not anti-medicine, right? Anti-conventional medicine. I'm anti-overutilization of pharmacy. In this demon that we're facing right now, polypharmacy, is a real problem. And it's a problem that I've seen day to day in the work that I do. But you also see it too with how it's impacting the statistics, for our country.
When you say polypharmacy, traditionally I understand that as a patient is going to multiple pharmacies, is seeing multiple doctors and going to multiple pharmacies and getting multiple prescriptions, and there's not as much communication between those pharmacies?
That's part of it. When I think of polypharmacy, very simply, it's someone who's on more than 5 prescriptions per day. Right?
I like that one.
And that definition's changed a little bit over time. It used to be more than 1 or 2. Now it's 5. 10 years from now, maybe it's 10 or 20. Who knows?
Hope not.
But I have seen as my practice has evolved, back in the day as a student, getting somebody who would come in and ask for some support, a med profile for them might be, at the most 10 prescriptions. Now it's very common for me to see someone taking 15 prescriptions, 20 prescriptions, 30 prescriptions, 40 prescriptions per day.
That's common, John, because like I said, I haven't been in traditional practice.
I've seen a good chunk of it. Now, I don't know, is it just because they're coming to us because they know about what we do and they know about, kind of our way of practice? Or is it because the number of people affected by chronic disease has gone up so much? And chronic disease is kind of a very slippery slope for people, right? There's over 120 million people in America right now that have one or more chronic diseases. And when I'm talking about chronic diseases, I'm talking about, cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer, things like this, right? Not, I got hit by a truck and I need the ER, right? Mm-hmm. I'm with you. If you're in an acute phase situation, we have to use pharmacy. We have to use modern medicine, right? But I'm a big fan of population studies. And if you look at different populations around the world, chronic disease, unfortunately, is more prevalent in our country than it is a lot of other countries, right? And we also spend more on chronic disease than we do, let's say, if you were to go to Japan or if you were to go to Germany. We're spending almost $4 trillion annually.
It's like 6x compared to some of these other countries that have outcomes that are far and away better than what we experience here.
So are more pharmaceuticals the answer? I've come to believe that that's not the case. And there was a really interesting talk I went to while I was in school. They used to have, at the Manchester campus for Mass College of Pharmacy, these different speakers would sometimes come in and do like a little informational session for the students, right? It was very low key, very small. There was one, though, who I remember. He was a physician from Canada, and he came in and he'd written a book, and it was all about like different medication combinations. And I don't think he was well followed. I don't think he had a lot of traction, but I remember him talking about this subject and how challenging it can be. If somebody gets on 5 medicines, 6 medicines, you can have a situation where side effects develop, and those side effects are so frustrating, they're so debilitating that you have to go on more medication. And I'd seen that in practice. I'd worked a little bit in community pharmacy. I'd seen it often enough to know that, yeah, this is a thing. And it was kind of interwoven throughout my journey watching it happen. And then I watched it with my own dad. How he had to get put on, more than 10 medicines, 12 medicines at one point. And it's just tough, because you get to a situation where in patients or clients have described this to me, where they almost feel trapped. They're trapped around their pill box, or they're trapped around the routine, right? Where they have to take certain medicines at certain times, and it can feel,
without food.
Right, and it can feel very limiting for people. And I think that it can also be almost disempowering. And the goal of what we're trying to do at the Herbal Path is not to say medicine is bad, to say there's a place for it, but do we always need to reach for it as a first-line option? What about lifestyle? Like you said, what about movement? What about some things that don't cost anything at all, but could be literally life-changing for someone? There's so much to explore there.
Yeah, and so when you were, you're in the community pharmacy, and that's kind of where your path is going. You're rising through. You're getting the MBAs. You're learning business. You're on the path that they've put you on. What brought you back to the herbal path so that you could, begin thinking this way again?
This is another moment I remember very vividly, and it was painful. 2020. I'm sure most of us experienced some form of pain during that year.
Yeah.
Maybe just a little.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Generational trauma incoming 2020. Oh, man. Giddy up.
But 2020 for me was especially traumatic because I'd just taken over in 2019 a challenge district, right? It was kind of like my last assignment before I become a region director. So they usually will give you multiple districts, and I'd had 3 districts up to that point, where, they're kind of like building you into, okay, handling progressively more and more fires at once, seeing how many fires you can put out. They do it to everybody. But I remember very vividly 2019, it was a great year. The company did really well. I was in an uptrend, business was going great, with the MBA training and like everything I needed to do. So they said, here's your last challenge, right? You're going to get a very challenged district, East Boston, Chelsea, Revere, Lynn, just a place where the pharmacies need a lot of help. They need a lot of support. There's high turnover, right? There's a lot of distrust because they had over 6 different district managers in the span of a year. It was literally bleeding, that market. And I got it. And had 2020 COVID not happened, I probably would have been okay. But as it was, I'd taken over, and then we got hit with COVID-19, right? And the pressure that came out of that for a district manager in the pharmacy world was astronomical. You had to literally do backflips to keep stores open. I remember staying up late, making calls to pharmacists, like calling in favors left and right. Hey, can you come in? Can you work? Can you open? Can we not open 2 hours late? Can we not open 3 hours late? Going and working myself, and just it was a brutal span of time. And we got to a point where we felt like we were coming out of it. They released the vaccine. We had set up different clinics. There was a really strong plan in place. And I remember just having a boss who had no training whatsoever in pharmacy, and how frustrating that was. They were not I get pharmacy, I want to understand it, I want to learn more about it. They were, let me manage through the numbers. Let me manage through the spreadsheet. And I remember having a visit with them and them telling me, we need to cut the hours, right? We got to cut payroll. We got to cut the hours, and not being able to give raises to certain people. And during a time when they were working so hard, these pharmacists were like giving their all. They were giving their lives to support this initiative. And it was so painful to say to them, I'm sorry, I can only give you a 20-cent raise. Or, you know what, I'm gonna have to cut your overlap because corporate has said we need to cut by like 15%, 25%. And the business part of me understood all of that. But the human part of me, to see that we were busier than we'd ever been, record-breaking volume, because COVID, right? People were looking for answers. They're looking for more medicine. They're looking for vaccines. So we were extremely busy, but I had to cut. And that experience of like managing to the bottom line only, without heart, and then watching while the company talked about, we care about our people and we're doing our everything for people and we really care about pharmacists. And then watching a pharmacist in the break room break down in tears, and me having to go back there and be almost like a counselor, like, you can do this. I believe in you. You've got this. But then at the end of it, I remember coming out of that being micromanaged even more on payroll. And it was just again and again, cut. I used to have weekly conference calls about cutting payroll.
What a crazy environment.
It was
hey, we're making as much money as we've made in the last 20 years in opportunities at the doorstep for us. Oh, let's not take care of the people who haven't quit, who haven't left us, because a lot of people did that.
A lot of people did.
My wife, who's a pharmacist, she said, are you serious with what you're trying to make me do and trying, with these shots and trying to continue this, going down this
Yes.
path and what's being requested of me?
Yes.
No thanks. Clinical pharmacy, here I come. See you later.
Right.
And she got out of it. And it's like what they put people through and to the dissonance that a lot of these pharmacists now, it's really sad, that what it did to them.
Yes.
How they care and they don't care, because they were treated like dogs.
Correct. And that was exactly, unfortunately, the way I would explain it. And I remember around that time, something very pivotal happened. I re-encountered and reconnected with Ron. After all this time, after being kind of aloof from him, I'd run into him by chance while I was taking a walk around the block. He was walking his dog. He was with his wife. He's like, John, how are you? And after the fact, he described me as being very aloof in that encounter. But during that encounter, I had just come off the phone trying to keep one of my stores open. My pharmacy manager had been like crying on the other end because they just had a robbery the previous day. It was rough. But that encounter precipitated my brain to start thinking again, right? And I said, you know what? All those years ago, maybe the time is now. And then we reconnected. We had lunch together, and it felt like rediscovering an old friend. And I needed that, because we hadn't had that.
Are you a New Hampshire guy?
I've lived all over, but I've spent most of my life in New Hampshire.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you just happened to be on a walk, and
happened to be on a walk, encountered him, and it was almost like, here's a message.
Yeah.
Here's a message from the beyond or whatever have you. Now is the time. And then we started planning. We started strategizing because he was at a point where in 5 years he wanted to step away, 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
I was at a point where I wanted something new.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to feel like I'm actually using my license. I wanted to feel like I'm actually doing what I went to school to do initially. And we both wanted, I think, kind of the same thing in a way, to grow the Herbal Path and to get it to a point where more people understood what it was all about. And that was what began it. And I remember the last day that I worked at the retail pharmacy, chain, and just...
I love how you don't say the names,
Yeah.
but guess what, baby? They're all the same. They're all trash. Giddy up.
And I remember at the end, just being like, I can't believe I'm really doing this. And I felt this wave of freedom as I drove away from the corporate office that I had not felt for like 8 years, right? Like 8 years. And I was able to breathe, and this weight was lifted off of my shoulders. And I felt like purpose. Now I'm going to be able to live the mission, the vision, the purpose of truly helping people, of helping people find the healing tools they need, not necessarily the ones they want, but the ones they need. And I remember the first day at the Herbal Path being like, it all felt so right. It all felt so right. And that was a pivotal time. But that chance encounter with Ron was really what allowed me to step away. That and the horrid conditions and feeling like I desperately want to support my people, but you're not giving me the tools. So that's when I truly realized, actually, what he had said, Ron, those many years ago,
Yes.
was spot on. The system is so broken, it doesn't matter. It didn't matter how high I went. I could have eventually become a region director. I could have been a divisional. But the higher you go, the less your voice counts. The more that you have to please the higher ups, the shareholders, whoever have you, the more it becomes about just making a profit. And
Can I challenge you on one thing?
Of course you can.
I don't think it's because the system is broken. I think it's because the system is created this way.
Interesting.
It's created this way where we profit, primacy shareholder, 1919 Ford versus Dodge. It came in and it created a system where now we were going to go and teach this in law and in business school, that primacy shareholder is the most important part of business, money back to the shareholder. And it takes away the stakeholders, the people who are in the business, the employees, the people who are in the community of the employees, the environment that the business lives in, the owners of those businesses. It eliminates what's best for them when you get up to that big corporate level. And that system is perpetuating itself. Of course it's going to do that. Of course it's going to get less and less human as it funnels its way up. And that's what I see that you've done is you've kind of taken you've taken that back a little bit. You take back that humanity with the pharmacy that you guys do.
Yeah.
Sorry
That's
to
really
interrupt you there.
interesting. I love that take on it. And I think it's just because maybe adopting some of the language from other providers that I've worked with, from other practitioners, but also my own observation. And you know how it is when you're in the fishbowl of community pharmacy, you can't really see until you step out.
I want to say something
because you're just so focused. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, you're so focused, and like you made a great point where the patients who come in, and there's always just like you're trying to, they're angry or they're sick or something, and you're just trying to get them out as fast as possible because you have to worry about something else. But also, what happens on the back end of those pharmacies is that, and this is what I want to ask you is what it's like, at the Herbal Path, on the back end when you're herbalists and you're, the people who are working at your stores come together and they talk about those patients. I know that, there's not much sympathy or empathy for these folks. When I was working in community pharmacy, it was just like, man, that person is really sick. And yeah, they maybe give us a little bit of a hard time because something happened with their insurance and all this stuff. But we only care, once they leave, we only care about getting reimbursement from their insurance and not even like making sure that human being is okay, or that they're, they weren't really causing us too much strife. They just, their insurance screwed things up here. And that's usually the third party payers are the worst amongst us. And so it's on the back end, when a patient comes into your store, and they leave your store rather, how is your staff interacting? Do you know that energy that I'm talking about in community pharmacy?
I do. And I think I knew a lot of the people. First of all, at the pharmacy I worked at, it was very hard to get to know people because they move you around a lot. But at one of my longer stints in a store, I remember getting to know some of the folks there. And they were delightful people, lovely people, but it wasn't even close to the way we've been able to connect with the community at the Herbal Path. And, at the Herbal Path, I think it's a great example of how people come in and, we have a conversation and maybe we ask about how their dog is doing or how their kid is doing. We have different generations coming to the Herbal Path. I have a person who came in and now their granddaughter's coming in looking for different remedies. So seeing that family connection, I think, is one of the most special things about being, in the Herbal Path and what we do. And just the connectedness. There's so much connectedness in the holistic health and wellness space. Like when you really get into the field and you start working together and, developing your network of different practitioners to work with, I think that there's a lot of positive energy that can be tapped into. And I think some of it too is it translates to the patients. It translates to the clients. And I've never had, the large scale blow up sessions that I've had in community pharmacy, right? Like I haven't had people come in and threaten to kill me or, to slash my tires, or, I had somebody key my car once, right? Because they were angry about their prescription. And thankfully, I've not had that here at the Herbal Path, but I think it's just set up differently.
I don't think you have to be thankful for it. I think maybe thankful for your staff and thankful for you having the morals and thankful for Ron and thankful for the, the gentleman, the early herbalist that was mentoring you to create that foundation and system in place where people were able to come in and get some healing. So when you're coming in and you have chronic disease and, you're coming to a pharmacy every single month to get these drugs to treat your disease, you would expect it to get better. Right, you would expect there to be some type of level of improvement, and you said it. You alluded to it earlier in the show. There's never that progress. I don't want to say never. Some people can improve off of traditional pharmacy, conventional pharmacy. But it's like 5%, guys. It's so maybe even smaller than that. And those are people who are on one or two drugs just to manage one or two things that they need. The people who are true polypharmacy, like you said, they're all getting sicker by the day, and a lot of these drugs are participating in that. And so, imagine that. Imagine, coming to somewhere and constantly being sick. And also that someone comes into the Herbal Path and they say, hey, this is what's going on with me. And you might say to them, you don't need zinc or magnesium or, milk thistle here. You could probably use some of that too. But what you really need is some yoga. What you really need is to put a weighted vest on and go for a walk. You really need to spend some time with your family. And that, saying stuff like that, you can have Movement. You can have those
Yeah, you
conversations.
can.
Yeah, movement, love. You can have those conversations in the herbal path and conventional pharmacy that it's not even thought of. There's not even you
No.
never even get to that point. You movement, love, no thanks. You're not even if you're just how many prescriptions does this person take? Can I fill them and can I fill them next month for them? So how frustrating. That's why the people are blowing up. Never mind the balance that a lot of these drugs take you out of. And you hit that right on the head as whatever it can be doing, which can be really great in acute situations because you're completely out of balance and it needs to, fix you and heal you, or not heal you, but fix you and stabilize you. That's great. But long-term, these drugs are creating creating negative impacts and maybe even addictions that you're having to deal with and taking you so far out of balance that's why they're coming in or is having those negative interactions.
And it's tough too, because I think sometimes the public doesn't grasp the necessity or the necessary evil of taking their time when coming off of a prescription that they've been on for a long time. And it can be just as dangerous, to say, oh, one day I'm not going to take these 15 medicines anymore. I'm just stopping them cold turkey. And we know from pharmacy, school, from practice, from all the learning that we've done, that there's certain meds that if you do that with, you can have a really serious problem emerge. You could have a hypertensive crisis. You could have different iterations of serotonin syndrome or reflux. So I do see some challenges as well from, I think you would ask me a little bit about how the staff interacts and that dynamic. Sometimes we have to talk people off a ledge because they come in so frustrated at mainstream medicine, so frustrated at the lack of support that they're getting, or they're not getting the love or the care or the compassion that they need, that they just want to go, I'm done. I'm no longer taking my medicine. I'm just going to come here from now on. And with those folks, I always urge them, it can't be that way. It took time to get on those medications. If you're motivated, if you want to truly come off, you're going to have to work with your physician. You're going to have a plan. You can't just stop taking them immediately because there could be some negative consequences of that. So sometimes we have to talk people off that ledge and help them establish a sense of patience because it takes time, right? It takes time to get a good health outcome. It takes time to develop patterns, behaviors, and habits. So there's almost a measure of counseling that goes hand in hand with the work that we do, where it's connecting with the person, at a more human level, recognizing that this person is human.
It's beautiful.
They're not a walking, talking cardiovascular disease, right?
Right.
They're a person like you or me.
Let me introduce you to Elevate, a premium functional mushroom company focused on supporting your highest potential. They offer a range of powerful supplements crafted from the finest medicinal fungi designed to naturally enhance your well-being. Elevate carries everything from mushroom tinctures, capsules, and teas to their delicious mushroom-infused coffees. All of their products are made with USA-grown mushrooms and contain only wild medicinal mushrooms, no psychoactive compounds. I personally use their Focus Tincture every day and love their chai tea blend. It's my go-to for a calming yet energizing boost. Elevate's products support mental clarity, immunity, and overall vitality. They ship nationwide, so whether you're new to functional mushrooms or already a fan, Elevate has something for you. Check them out at shopelevatemushrooms.com, where you will find a detailed description of each product and experience the difference for yourself. Yeah, and that's why they, you come in and somebody is giving you, this is my situation. I need support in my life, and you can meet them where they're at, and that's so impactful that no one at any community pharmacy, traditional community pharmacy, is getting currently.
And we also have a secret weapon, and our secret weapon. Well, I'd like to think we have more than one, but one of them is a good herbalist. And I would not underestimate the capability of a great herbalist, right? There are many clients that will come in and ask for the pharmacist and say, oh, I want to talk to the pharmacist and I really need the pharmacist, right? Where is John? But just as many of those folks could easily talk to one of the herbalists and get a better understanding of plant medicine, how different plants work in the body, what different plants are capable of. So we are very fortunate to have a couple really strong herbalists that work for us, some with even clinical training that can support someone's journey into the herbal realm, right? And I view it almost as a journey, right? A path, right? Walking the herbal path. It's very much a journey because everyone is at a different stage. It's not one size fits all. But the secret weapon is, you have someone come in and let's say they're on, we'll just use an average, 10 medications, right? So I'm taking 10 different
Yeah,
medicines a day.
let's play case study. You're
Yeah, let's play case study. Like
45,
therapeutics,
like
right?
therapeutics,
Yeah.
exactly. A 45-year-old
Alert and oriented, times 3. Yeah.
Okay,
exactly.
giddy up. So you have a 45-year-old male, presents to the Herbal Path with 10 medications across diabetes, elevated cholesterol, elevated high blood pressure. The standard that's the standard. Maybe there's some of their lab work is showing maybe their heart is could be going towards some medication there, but we're not necessarily supporting it yet. We're just doing the diabetes and supporting through those disease states now. The person is maybe 50 pounds overweight and doesn't exercise but does walk for their job a little bit.
Okay.
Comes in and wants to improve their life and try to get off some of these medications. And how would you guys approach that as a team over at the Herbal Path?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. A team, because that's absolutely what we would do. So for that type of situation, we would probably want to do more of a consultation. And we offer different services, right? Some of the services we offer are very much complementary. Somebody walks in, we have a conversation. What herbs are good for eye health? Oh, let's talk about that. Have you heard about bilberry? Have a conversation about bilberry. That's just all in a day's work, right? But for something that needs a workup, we typically would book a consultation because that does one of two things. One, it causes the person to have a different level of commitment almost, right? Because they premeditated it, they booked it. And then two, it gives us more information, right? Like we're trying to learn more about the person, not necessarily just the labs. The labs tell a story. We do need to read them, but we also want to hear about the individual. We want to hear about the person, right? And this is how good herbalists practice, is they try to learn as much as they can about the individual so that they can recommend the right plants to support their situation. So a classic example would be, I have this herbalist that is our clinical herbalist, right? Our senior herbalist, and she's always doing these consultations, right? So a classic example would be the person you just described, right? Very typical. So they would provide all of their information, and then at that point, before the consultation takes place, the herbalist and I sit down. We talk about the case, we talk about the different parameters, we talk about the medicines, and then very clearly, what are the contraindications, right? Because they may want to use certain herbs, but those herbs may not play well with the medications. So giving them the knowledge in advance that they need about the pharmaceuticals, and then they can do the rest, right? And there are times where, with particularly involved ones, where I may get called into these consultations, I may do them with an herbalist, right? But a lot of the background behind the scenes is where the teamwork comes in. And I've seen people go from being fairly beholden or imprisoned by conventional medicine almost to a place where they feel more empowered, right? So they learn during these things, right? We're educating, right? We're not treating, we're educating about lifestyle choices, right? About nutrition and how important that is, right? About things like yoga and acupuncture and what that can do to support someone. And whatever we say, we're backing it up with data. That's very important. The way we practice, we're not just, giving our opinions. No, we use PubMed extensively. We use UpToDate extensively. We use the Natural Medicine Suite extensively. So when we're preparing for these things, yes, there is a little bit of a free-form nature to it, but that's only because everyone's different, right? Even if someone has the same condition, they may not need the same plant. So a lot of the behind-the-scenes work, the work together from an herbalist and a pharmacist, is what goes into the development of a good recommendation for somebody, a good consultation. But let's say we had that scenario, right? And they come in and they want to get off medication. We're not taking people off their meds. That's an individual choice. The person has to make it. And we almost will always say you need to work with your physician because there are taper schedules you may need to take. It might not be right for you to come off of your medication at this time. But that's why we're set up the way we are, because regardless of whether they get off the medicine or not, we can help them. We can help them with lifestyle recommendations. We can help them with wellness advice. We can help them select different herbs that may support their given condition and may make it better for them. You know, there's so many different herbs out there that support our body returning to homeostasis. And this is really where an herbalist can come in and be like, okay, this is the person, this is their lifestyle, this is their routine. These are the plants that can help that person, not just their type 2 diabetes, right?
We all know how important strength training is for long-term health, but it can be hard to know where to start. I was in the same spot a year ago. You want to make sure you're doing exercises right, avoiding injury, and getting results, but it's easy to feel lost without a plan. That's when I found On Target Fitness. At On Target, you get a custom strength program, personalized attention in a small group setting, and the nutrition coaching you need for real lasting change. And the year I've been working out there, I've gotten stronger, more mobile, and more confident. My form has improved, and even something as simple as walking feels better. The group energy keeps me motivated, and every workout is fun. On Target just opened a new location in Kingston. Now you've got even more options to experience their amazing approach. If you're ready for lasting change, head to www.ontargetfit.com and schedule your session today.
Right.
That's a wonderful way to put it. This protocol, this plant can help this person, not the disease state. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine, like, you know, it was almost talked about in school as well, if you remember, that the reason why we like pharmaceuticals and why we go towards pharmaceuticals and why they're so trusted is because we know how quickly they work. And that was like embedded into our heads that we, you know, these drugs, they work quickly, they get person into, and even the ones that don't necessarily work quickly, you know, it's still, the thinking is still that way, because when we talked about herbs and supplements, it was like, oh, you have to be so patient. You have to, it really takes forever.
Yeah.
You know, this, and it's like, well, I don't think that's it's more about learning as the body needs to return to homeostasis. It needs to return to baseline because something is obviously out of balance. Mm-hmm. And that's what takes the time. And just the whole treatment approach is just so vastly different from what we learned.
Mm-hmm. It's different, but it's not. And this is where I'm going to kind of give some props to the European Union, because in Europe, they have a different way of treating herbal medicine. It's almost more legitimate, or considered more legitimate, than it is here in the States. So if you walk into an apotheke or an apothecary in Austria, for example, it might look a little like the Herbal Path, right? So kind of when I visited Austria, I kind of felt like, whoa, this is like home. I'm going into there. But the interesting thing about these places is they're using herbs in a very evidence-based way. And I'll point to one example specifically. Lavender extract, using that to stave off anxiety or stave off depression. And at first glance, you may think, wow, lavender, okay, that's a gentle flower. And how is that even close to Cymbalta or Paxil, right? Or one of those other medications. But there's some good literature you can look at that shows taking Paxil versus taking lavender, similar therapeutic outcomes with the lavender, less side effects. And I'm talking about a trial that used over 500 people. So again, this literature is there, but you've got to look for it. It's not easy to find, especially here in the States. And typically, it's going to come out of the European Union, Japan, China, places where they're very comfortable using herbs or using medicinal mushrooms. So there is stuff out there to almost back up, if you would, a conventional approach to herbalism. But our herbalists are always guarding against this allopathic herbalism, right? They're like, you know, we don't want to use herbs the same way that you would use a medication, John. It's more about connecting with the person, connecting with some of the intangibles, understanding their constitution, and then you can help them differently. You can help them more completely by helping them get back into balance, right? You mentioned that person, the 45-year-old male. That is a classic example of a number of different imbalances, right? You have the type 2 diabetes, the imbalance of blood sugar, you have the imbalance of cholesterol. You have a situation where the body is now in kind of an unnatural state almost and not able to deal with all these different things going on. So the allopathic way of dealing with that would be, let's treat the type 2 diabetes, let's treat the high cholesterol. The herbalist approach for addressing something like that would be, let's gather information on the person, make herbal recommendations that support their life and can help bring some of these parameters back into balance. So you may get a similar outcome, right? But you're approaching more of a nuanced, balanced state.
Yeah, it sounds like now people are, do you have some people who are super receptive to that and then some that you have to, kind of coach along and get there and it takes some time?
I would say for someone who's very open-minded and very receptive, well, first of all, when people walk through the door, they're all coming with different levels of understanding, right? We view ourselves as a bridge, like literally the herbal path is a bridge. We're the bridge between Western medicine and, Eastern medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic tradition, Unani tea, all these different herbal traditions, right? We're the bridge, right? Because we're right next to Wentworth Douglas Hospital. Sometimes people are discharged. They come in to figure out what we're all about. So everyone comes with a different level of expectation, and you have to meet people where they're at. There are people that walk through the door that are just kind of exploring it for the first time, that think, that most of it is just hocus pocus. And you know what, maybe I can use an herb, but I'll try it. My doctor recommended it. My friend is using it. I don't really think it's going to work, but I'll try it. Then we have people that come in that are like, to hell with conventional medicine. I'm done with it. I just want to use every herbal tincture in the store, right? And I'm going to go live in the woods, right?
Yeah.
And you have everything in between.
Yeah.
So I think it's also knowing about people and knowing where to meet them and knowing how to listen. Knowing how to listen is a very important part of what we do. So two very important things when you work at the Herbal Path. One of them is learning how to listen, and then two, asking the right questions. It's all about asking questions to learn about the person, to figure out, what is it that they really truly need in this moment. Because they might not need magnesium. They might not need, mugwort, right? They might not need bugleweed, but they might. You need to ask the right questions, take time, and then never guess. That is a rule we have, never guess. So if somebody is coming in and they come in with, let's say, scleroderma with sclerodactyly, and they're looking for some type of remedy for that. Or maybe they have...
Can you tell me what that is?
So scleroderma is where you have a hardening of tissues that's going on. It becomes fibrotic in nature. And sclerodactyly would be where you get almost these knobby, twisted fingers where you can't even pick anything up.
Yeah, if you would ask me, I probably could have put it together from the didactics of the words, the words.
Sclerodactyly, right?
Sclerodactyly, yeah, the other one too.
But so that's one example. Idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis is another. Sometimes people come in with these very hard to address conditions because they're not getting the support that they need from conventional medicine because they just don't know. There might be a theoretical treatment, but they don't really know, does it work, does it not work? So you have all these different levels of people coming in, and we're really about the bridge work, but it's asking the right questions. It's never guessing. So we never guess because there's usually somebody on staff who's had experience they can lend to the situation, or we have a database where we can look up what is the condition, what types of herbs might we recommend or might we try, and we're always very transparent with people. We don't know what this would, do. We don't have answers, but we can connect you with someone. We can connect you with someone who might. And I think we're also a point of connection. So we're a bridge, but we're a point of connection to different providers.
Have you solved some of those issues with people?
We solved a really interesting one. I'll take you back maybe a couple years ago. And this person had come in with a really angry face rash. But they had come in because in addition to the angry face rash, now they were getting it on their arms, right? And they turned over the palms of their hands and they were peeling, right? They're peeling. It looked kind of alarming. So they were looking for something topical to put on their skin. One of the staff members helped them, gave them a recommendation, and they went on their way. A week later, they came back. It was even worse. Now it's on their legs, like this angry red rash on their legs. And they're starting to get like little dots and pimples around their lips, right? And they're in so much pain. Now they're wearing gloves because their skin is like peeling, right? So this one, the credit goes to someone who really was digging and asking the questions, right? And she asked the question about detergent, right? And it turns out this person had switched detergents to a lavender-based detergent. And they were allergic to lavender. They went in, they got the allergy test, they were allergic to lavender. And what they were experiencing was an allergic reaction. So we solved this for the person, right? And to this day, they're one of our top customers. They come in, they're so grateful, they recommend us all the time because they're like, I went to the doctor, I went to urgent care, nobody could solve this for me. They gave me corticosteroids, they gave me like cortisone cream to put on, and nothing really helped, because this was like a month or two like that we were dealing with all this. But by cutting out the lavender, by changing the detergent, it all went away. It all went away.
This same person could have been happening to them for 2 years. They could have had hospitalizations because of it. All of these negative outcomes.
More steroids.
More steroids destroying their gut, destroying their bones. And instead, you guys were able to figure it out, the true root cause. And that's really what, kind of was really neat, because you mentioned testing and allergy testing, and the fact that you're able to figure out the root cause of what was going on. And this was this person was allergic to lavender. They don't need it in their life. Please remove it. Are you guys doing testing? That's amazing. It's amazing that you're providing that care.
We don't do testing specifically on our own. We have to partner because I'm not a physician. I'm a pharmacist. We partner. We have a nurse practitioner upstairs. There's some different providers that we know, naturopaths in the area. So we have a good network of referrals that we can.
For sure. Yeah. I assume that as much as what I meant is, are you guys using that testing like consistently? Yes. And, genetic testing and stuff that,
We try to use as much as we can, don't necessarily operate in the blind, be comfortable getting a lab done, evaluating that lab. I've evaluated many labs and will continue to do so. But we're very much in favor of people having information. I think it's important to have that. Yep.
Yeah, and just kind of like where functional medicine is going is we're understanding that some of us have genes that are that are activated, and some have genes that are mutated, and it gives us an ability to process or not process certain molecules in our body. And so I'm curious, do you have are you doing any of that type of work?
We're not doing pharmacogenetic testing right now.
Okay.
Pharmacogenetics, I think, is a fascinating field. And in school, one of my favorite topics was pharmacokinetics, right? Like pharmacokinetics for me was like, wow, I love it. It's the math and the equations. And that was my jam. I was actually a tutor for pharmacokinetics.
Could have used you. Could have used you.
But then pharmacogenomics was kind of something that was taught by the same instructor. It was an elective, right? And I remember I took it, Dr. Aquamensa, and I loved it. It was so interesting. And I remember just being like, you know what? If community pharmacy doesn't work out, I'm going to go back to school, get a PhD, and this is what I'm going to study. Well, obviously that never worked out. But just the other day, a pharmacist stopped in to see us, and this is all he does: pharmacogenomic testing. And he was a really interesting person. And I haven't managed to connect a lot with him yet, but it opened up my mind because we haven't been doing pharmacogenomics, right? We haven't been doing the cheek swab and what is are you a poor metabolizer? Are you a fast metabolizer? But he's doing this already. He has a business where he's doing this. So it did open up my mind to so many more possibilities. And I think that's another good example of how at the Herbal Path, we're always willing to learn more. It's a culture of lifelong learning. You know, we value continuing education. I'm constantly taking different CEs. You know, I'm always trying to learn. My staff, the same way. You know, the herbalists are always taking herbal classes and trying to advance in their field, because you never know what you don't know, right? It's very important to constantly be cultivating that attitude of learning in order to help more people.
Yeah, I love that. I'd love to be connected with that, with that pharmacist as well. Once you
I'll connect you.
please,
I'll
yeah,
connect you.
great for a conversation here on the show, because I do think that pharmacogenomics will, that's the future if we do really want to get specific into it. And with the herbs and the supplements, it's going to be so helpful for that.
It will.
With the food that we eat. Like there's a lot of food that there's a lot of stuff that we put in our food that we can't process, that we still, that we can tell from a gene test whether we should be eating it or not. And, if everybody could get these gene tests, that would be better. So I'm trying to, I think, then I get nervous about like everyone's getting their DNA tested. And then there's that, go down that road where it's like everyone has access to all the DNA in the world. And maybe that shouldn't be in a database. I don't know, but it's going to really give us some insight into medicine and what, how these drugs and how these supplements and molecules work to an even greater extent in our body. So it fascinates me. Can I ask, I've seen a switch, you've been on this path for a long time now, where we've been, I saw, maybe COVID 2019, I was on the path a little bit before then, but I saw this shift where trust in medicine and conventional medicine was going to not be as prevalent as it was when our parents grew up, when it was just, this is the drug and this is you take it. It says to take the ibuprofen because the doctor said to take it, and this is what you should be doing. Now it's supplements are more popular, and herbs are more popular, I feel like, than they've ever been in my life, which is amazing and a really amazing thing. But it's also scary because if everybody was going to the herbal path, that's a giddy up in my book. That's amazing because there's a pharmacist there, there's herbalists there. I know that you are, from conversations that we have, that you're vetting your vendors and that you'll allow vendors to if they don't meet quality and they're not able to produce a certificate of analysis, then, hey, these don't align with our values anymore, and we're going to move on. That is the ultimate giddy up, and having people like that in your community is amazing. Some people might go to the herbal path and they might see, oh shoot, that just because the way their brain thinks, they say, oh, that there, I know what that drug is there, and they told me what to get, and it's $27.99 at the herbal path, and then I know on Amazon it's $21.99. I know at CVS it's $18.99. So I'm going to go get it there.
What's the cheapest?
The cheapest, right?
Yeah,
What's the cheapest, right? Because that's just how we are, and we all are trying to get by. Things
understandable.
It's a very understandable thing. It's a human thing. People are going to take advantage of that, and they're I see that now.
But I would challenge them, and the reason why I would challenge them is it's one thing to read a label, but it's another to really read a label. And what do I mean by that, right? Well, we've noticed that supplements have kind of had a rise on social media, right? TikTok, the TikTok herbalist, right? Dancing around, recommending ashwagandha. But all ashwagandhas are not created equal. We need to consider things like sourcing. Is it organic or not, right? Because sometimes these things can have pesticides or heavy metals. So we want to make sure that the supplement itself is pure, but we also want to make sure that it's not bound by all these fillers and inactive ingredients that can allow a company to save money. And a lot of what we do is we teach people, or I teach people, how to read a label. Not only looking at this is the active ingredient. So I have 600 milligrams of ashwagandha in this, capsule. What is in there with the ashwagandha? And there's this other line that's very important that says other ingredients. The smaller that list is, typically the better. And there are many supplements that I could go into, let's say Walmart or CVS or Rite Aid or Walgreens, doesn't matter. Pick up the supplement, and the supplement itself is good, but all those binders and fillers make it so that my body is probably not going to get any of that supplement, right? Maybe I'll get a fourth of it. Maybe I'll get a fifth of it. But because it's so tightly bound with titanium dioxide or talc, things that just we maybe shouldn't be putting in our body, right? But make the pill look pleasing, make it last long, right? I might end up just excreting all of that, right? So it's so
or not, or maybe
not.
keeping it in your body and increasing your toxic load.
Maybe. Plastic bottles, right? Like using things that come in plastic bottles, plastics that are off-gassing, right? That aren't stored properly. So a lot of what we're doing is, again, we're trying to find how do we limit some of these things? And then also, how do we teach people, right? Because you don't have to buy it at the Herbal Path. I'd love it if you come in and shop with us, and, we're small business, we're local. We need support, right? But ultimately, it's about the learning. The learning is the most important, because then you're empowered, and then you can make a decision, and then you can help yourself, right? So picking up a product and knowing intrinsically, wow, this has so many binders and fillers, but it has a beautiful label, and it's ashwagandha that I saw on TikTok, right? But you know what? It's got all those fillers in it. I probably shouldn't be taking it, right? So it's important to teach people how to do those things. And if you feel like you need a biochemistry degree to read a label, we probably shouldn't be taking it. Shampoos are a great example. Soaps are a great example, right? And that's actually one of our most popular sections of the store is our health and beauty products, because we're bringing in soaps and we're bringing in shampoos that have ingredients that people can read and understand versus all these types of parabens and chemicals that might be endocrine disruptors, right? So it's so important to not only look at the advertising, the flash, the pizzazz, the schmaltz, and to instead cut through all that, cut to the chase. What is it that I'm taking? And is it bound too tightly to get absorbed? And that's an important conversation to have with people, I feel.
Cannabis products are becoming more popular every day. Whether you're looking for the best night's sleep, trying to mitigate daily stress, or just trying to enjoy some laughter with friends, OG Cannabis is the store for you. OG Cannabis has an unbiased approach that is unique and simple. Unlike the competition, they don't sell their own manufactured products, but instead proudly showcase the best vendors across Maine. A dispensary like no other. Come and visit today at 18 American Way, Elliott, Maine. OG Cannabis. Oh, and don't forget to use my promo code, Dr. BeeWell. See you guys there. Giddy up. Yeah, it's just it's like those are the supplements that are being sold at CVS, right? So that then there's a lot that are just being sold on Amazon that are being created who knows where, manufactured who knows where. So people, please just get your supplements from someone like John at the Herbal Path, or from he doesn't say you need to come there, but from a trusted source, somebody who can provide a certificate of analysis if necessary, if requested, and just if that's the case, obviously it's third party tested. So, I get worried about that because you see so many people right now where there's, especially in the space that I'm in, people are just trying to always promote this and promote that. And can I ask you about some of those?
Yeah, I mean, let's have a conversation.
Giddy up. That are out there. One that I have done some substantial research on, and I feel comfortable taking, but I'm curious about your opinion on it. Is creatine, creatine monohydrate. Something that I remember like learning about when I was a kid and learning about just from like my older brothers because they were taking it.
Yeah.
And then it kind of like I saw post about it. There's this researcher that I follow, this kid Nicholas Fabiano. He does a pretty good job of it, and he went pretty deep into the creatine, and it made me aware of some of these studies, and it's like, whoa, as much as sometimes I get angry at the pharmacy degree and what we learned in school, I am grateful that they taught me how to assess
and you can
literature,
understand it,
and I can understand studies, and I can move through them. That's like, thank you for that. That's the giddy up, and I found it to be The studies seemed small scale. They need to be powered a little bit larger, but they, significant. And I've started to take it on my own, and I've been doing this
Mm.
for about a year now,
Yep.
and I've seen benefits in my body and in my brain.
Mhm.
And maybe it's placebo, I don't know, but I'm curious about what your opinion is on it.
Yeah, I tend to think that it's not placebo, and I'm very much a fan in favor of creatine. Having seen not only from my own understanding in exercise physiology, I was a fan of it back then. I think the difference is now I know how to evaluate what is a high quality creatine and what is not. And that's important. That's important because there are creatines on the market that are good creatines, but are loaded with sugar, inactive ingredients that we shouldn't be taking, and all these other harmful fillers and dyes and chemicals. There's a couple brands in particular that market to bodybuilders and to the masses where they use several dyes that are known to cause cancer in rats, right? And this is where I think it's important to pick something that is as pure as possible. So knowing that it has certifications on it, is it NSF certified? Is it just the creatine monohydrate? Is it alkalinized? Or are you dealing with a product that has all this sugar in it or has all these fillers? To truly get the benefits out of the creatine, you want the creatine, but you don't want to take dyes with it, right? If you can avoid it. But I am a fan of creatine. I don't understand it as much as that researcher does, but I do understand that the benefits can be beyond muscle growth, can be beyond muscle strength, right?
Mhm.
And we start looking at the immune system and how the body reacts. I think immunology is another topic that I love. I could talk for 4 hours or more on immunology.
We're gonna do it
But
sometime.
we don't have that time.
We're gonna do it sometime.
Yeah, but we're going to do it sometime. But I guess whatever we can do, and this is kind of a universal guiding principle of the Herbal Path too, to help support the body's return to balance, we advocate for that. One of the best ways to do that is to help support the immune system. Our immune system is extremely important for returning our body to balance, for reacting to stress, reacting to inflammation, keeping us well, and not having us be sick. And creatine is thought to help the immune system. So what can help the immune system? I'm all for it. I think there's something that might be even better. That's kind of like our secret in the Herbal Path world. But I'm definitely a fan of creatine.
Well, I love to hear that you're a fan of creatine. I am a little nervous because there was like a study a long time ago that they did with some rugby players, and there was an increase in DHT. And I'm trying to hold on to this hair.
Yeah.
I'm trying to
You're doing a pretty good job right now.
Not bad, right?
Yeah.
We're holding on okay. We're
Yeah.
getting thin, but we're still holding on. But the creatine is too good to even care.
Mm.
Because I'm saying, hey, like I feel like I'm mentally sharper, I'm
Yep.
stronger, and so I'm like, hey, less sick. So I'm saying, hey, bring
You're
it on.
chugging along. Right?
I'm chugging along. So I
Yeah.
say, if we're going bald, too bad. Sorry. But will you share the secret with me? That's better than creatine?
You're probably already aware, but medicinal mushrooms. So 55% of our novel therapeutics, right,
We are very aware.
are based on medicinal mushrooms. And I read this book that was very transformative for me. And it's called Mycelium Running: How Mushrooms Can Save the World. And in there, it talks about how mushrooms can eat rubber, how mushrooms can help bees and stave off these mites that attack colonies, right? And how mushrooms really are kind of like taking your immune system to the gym every day. And that was an analogy that I could really get behind, right? Because I understood weightlifting and training and all that. But I just love what mushrooms can do for someone. And I've had more success in our practice dealing with somebody's seasonal allergies using mushrooms year round. Like, they can try all sorts of herbs that are antihistaminic, that might relieve allergy symptoms. But then you get somebody on a really good mushroom formula, and then all of a sudden, where did the allergies go? Why am I not reacting as badly to allergy season? I get that question all the time.
Modulating the immune system.
Modulating the immune system. So mushrooms to me are kind of like the best kept secret in supporting our body's immune system, right? I love mushrooms.
What's your daily dose of mushrooms? What do you, I know it's different for everybody because everyone needs to be supported in a different way. I'm just curious about you because I'm on the mushrooms, and John, I'll definitely connect you with, with this company here, Elevate. They're amazing. They grow all their mushrooms in Rollingsford. Incredible processes.
Cool.
They have, they have tinctures. They have capsules.
Mhm.
They are, they're leading it in this area in New England for a brand that is created by somebody who lives here,
Mhm.
which is I think is important.
It's
And
important.
yeah, I can't wait to connect you with them because they are awesome. I can't wait to figure out what mushroom, people that you're dealing with, and we'll definitely chat more about that. But please tell me what your, what you're supplementing
So
with mushrooms.
every day, like before I start the day, I need my power shake, right? So I start with astragalus goes in there, nettles goes in there, a handful of greens goes in there, maybe some spirulina, but then the mushrooms, right? And I have a whole bunch of different mushroom powders I use, but I might use cordyceps, I might use agarikon, I might use some amadou. I love turkey tail. Turkey tail's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And then where would I be without reishi?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Reishi, Ganoderma lucidum, that's one of my favorites. So, I use a different blend. It's not the same every day, but there's enough overlap there where I feel like, I'm getting at least some benefit from all of those. And it's a miracle because I used to be that person that would have seasonal allergies, and I'd be out there like this time of year, I'd be sneezing my guts out outside and I would not be able to function. And now it's a thing of the past, right?
Bring it.
So I think the
Bring it.
results are there. They are.
Yeah, dude. Since, like I said, and who knows? Maybe it's not the creatine. It's likely a mix of both. But I've been on the Elevate supplements now for going about a year and a half, and it's like completely foundationally changed my life and how I get sick and react to sickness. I don't have. I mean, I was on the path with honey in terms of like thinking that had a really good. The thing with in terms of allergies, it absolutely does. It's just it's so challenging because we're a moving species and you need to take it consistently. So for someone like me, it's really easy. I was able to treat my allergies with honey because I'm getting honey from all over the place, from all these different regions, and within 50 to 100 to 150 miles from my house, and I'm mixing those into my food every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, it's easy, to get people to consistently put the honey into even though it's this great substance, to get them to do that every day, to be consistent with it, it's not as easy, and you have to be so consistent with the eating food, getting the honey from different places.
Mm-hmm.
And I created a business, BeeWell Box, which is a honey-based subscription service that provided this for people, but the adoption of it, the adoption of using honey as a medicine.
Adoption.
Yeah, it's the adoption of it. They can't necessarily. Some people did, and some people are still loving that, and they're doing the same thing as me. But when I saw how easy it was to do it with the mushrooms comparatively for people who aren't me, who don't want to use honey every single day, or don't wish to use honey every day for whatever. Maybe they have some reason that they can't use honey every day. There is no reason really. But I'm saying, like, people might say, "Oh, I have diabetes." Okay, I'll show you a study that honey does not increase insulin sensitivity in type 2 diabetics if taken at a appropriate dose. But the mushrooms were transformative, and it was just like, wow, I'm not getting sick anymore.
But you said something really important there, adoption. And I didn't really talk about that at all, and I feel like maybe I should, because the hardest thing sometimes is to get somebody to take something. So a lot of these nutrients, these herbs, these nutraceuticals, these mushrooms, they work really well, but consistency is so important. And I've seen how, we make really good recommendations and the person is all jazzed up about it, and then they just forget to take it. Or, oh, wow, I don't like the taste. I can't get past that, right? And it's just the adoption part of it, that needs to be considered. So it's so important for us when we're going and making recommendations for people that we ask them things like, do you prefer a capsule? Do you prefer a powder? And this is all basic pharmacy stuff, right?
Yeah, it's
do you
so
prefer
good.
a tincture? But if we don't do that, if we miss that, right, then sometimes we make recommendations for people and they're never going to use them. They're never going to open the powder. They're never going to open the tincture. So it's so important to meet people where they're at with what are they comfortable with and what is right for them. And I think mushrooms was a class of different, nutraceuticals that's amazing to use. We talked a little bit about that. Adaptogens is another class that's really interesting. And that's a class that gets kind of bandied about a lot, like, oh, it's an adaptogen, or, this is an adaptogen, or that is an adaptogen. And the reality is there's a lot less adaptogens, true adaptogens, than people think. But the concept of that, I think, is so helpful for illustrating what an herbalist is. Because in an herbalist world, again, we're trying to bring people back into balance. That is what adaptogens are doing. And an adaptogen, for someone who doesn't know, is an ingredient or an herb or a plant that meets very specific criteria, that has a non-specific effect in the body, helping the body be more resilient to stress, kind of weather the storm better, helping to regulate the cortisol curve, right? But again, bringing the body back into balance. And I think that, using adaptogens, I'd almost have right up there with medicinal mushrooms, because it's an amazing class. And the one that I think what maybe your listeners are very familiar with would be ashwagandha. Who hasn't heard in this day and age of ashwagandha, right? That's one. Rhodiola is another, right? Siberian ginseng, eleuthero, that's one.
Yeah, cool.
So you kind of get into that realm. Holy basil is another one. So that's another class where it's like indispensable, for us. We love adaptogens at the Herbal Path.
What is the most powerful adaptogen that you guys give access to at the Herbal Path?
I would say it depends.
The ashwagandha?
It depends. I think ashwagandha is the one we understand the best.
Okay.
But not necessarily the most powerful. It depends on what you're trying to address. If somebody comes in and their endocrine system is very disrupted, and maybe they're looking at regulating testosterone or estrogen levels, I don't think I would choose ashwagandha. I might go more in the direction of maca, right?
Okay.
Because maca is also an adaptogen, right? And that's a root. And it's from the Peruvian and Incan culture, right, in South America. But that gets used a lot to help balance testosterone, balance estrogen, help people deal with menopause or hot flashes, right? Again, the most powerful adaptogen really depends on what is the person's situation and what are they trying to do? What are they trying to address, right?
It's pretty neat because you mentioned that it was something that is a very specific set of criteria, and that it creates a non-specific effect in the body.
Response to stress.
Yep. And so when how do we study that?
But then there's other like little nuances, right? And this is what I've learned from some of the herbalists, right? That even though adaptogens are adaptogens, right? And they all kind of have this response, if you would, in the body. Some of them are more activating. Some of them are more calming. And this is where it gets harder to study it. It's almost easier to study traditional Chinese medicine and then study adaptogens, or study Ayurvedic tradition and then study adaptogens, because they talk about things in Ayurvedic tradition is originating from the gut, for being warming or being cooling. And that's just terminology that in pharmacy we just don't use, right? But herbalists are using that every day, right? So their understanding of plants allows them to better research these things. A lot of the research we have on adaptogens is out of Russia. So like Russia, the European Union, there's some really small studies out of America, out of Colorado. But again, they're looking mostly at stress. They're looking at cortisol. They're looking at, sleeping, right? They're looking at cravings, like food cravings, right? And for that, I think the best literature, you're probably going to find it on ashwagandha, if that's how you're evaluating that adaptogen.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. There's to ask you another question that, and maybe you guys already are, giving it to people at the Herbal Path, but it's something that I just had the inventor of the technology on the show, a couple of weeks ago, where he's the inventor of the first open cup hydrogen therapy tablet. And so he's taking effervescent magnesium and created a tablet, but was able to press it. You put it into water, and it's giving you 12 parts per million, in 250 mLs. So, basically like six milligrams of H2, so hydrogen therapy. And the theory behind that is that it's creating, short-term stress in the body, hormesis, and that your body needs that hydrogen. So you drink it really quickly, it brings hydrogen into your gut, or hydrogen's necessary to move ions in and out of cells. And, that return to say, "Ooh, that's a little, what's going on there?" And then our body's ability to deal with that stress. So are you guys exploring hydrogen therapy at all?
We are not. We probably should be. I will say we work with a number of different practitioners that do use this.
Oh, cool.
And are well versed in it. I think there's a particular naturopathic doctor in the area who that's almost what their expertise is.
Whoa.
But for me, when I think about, okay, operating in this field, yes, I'm a bit of a generalist, but we're also more specific to herbs. We're more specific to plants. We do have a lot of nutraceuticals. We do have a lot of vitamins and minerals and things like that. But when it comes into, knowledge and like really getting into the weeds, literally sometimes, it's about the herbs. It's about the plants, and I think that there is benefits to that therapy. I've certainly heard of it. I'm familiar with it. But to be able to have a nuanced discussion about it, I'm not there yet. I'm just not there yet. Yeah.
For sure. And please, at some point, please share who that practitioner is. That's
I will.
Yeah, crushing that in the area. So yeah, and I think that that's great to actually to hone in and for people to understand that, because there is so much out there, and you guys are the herbal path. You are the herbal. That's your not the main. I don't want to call it the main mission. It's your company.
Yeah.
It's your mission. But it's
Mission.
It's to always incorporate with the herbs. I mean, you guys went through a rebrand recently. It used to just say the Herbal Path, and now it looks different. So I mean, and there's herbs on it. It's echinacea.
Yeah,
if I'm not
we love
mistaken.
echinacea. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about how that kind of fell into.
Echinacea is a lovely plant, and it kind of has these different contexts and meanings. But I think of echinacea in its most basic sense. I think about its connection to the environment, right? Bees very much are attracted to echinacea. We have a garden of echinacea out back. It's seasonal, comes up every year at the Herbal Path. And it's right outside where the staff would sit down and eat lunch. And there's like a little tiny garden back there. But the echinacea, it's so resilient. It's a symbol of resilience. It's a symbol of immunity, right? The immune system. Echinacea is that traditional remedy that gets used in many countries to support the immune system. Oh no, I'm getting a cold. Where's my echinacea, right? It's not like here, oh, let me grab that cough syrup, right? Over in Germany, it might be, let me take my echinacea. Right?
So good.
So you see with echinacea, there's this statement, if you would, of healing, of medicine. It says something without spelling it out. And that's one of the reasons why we use it in our logo, that symbolism, if you would. And then there's sustainability and connectedness with the earth, connectedness with the environment. And this is one of our values, right? Because we are attempting to educate people, not just about the plants that they can take and what they can put in their body, but also cultivating respect for the earth, respect for sustainable practices with agriculture. And when our herbalists do weed walks or educational trainings or events, there's a hefty dose of that mixed in. There are certain plants that might be popular on social media, but they're endangered. So should we be taking them? I'll give you a very classic example. Slippery elm. Slippery elm gets talked about all the time. It gets put in teas, right? It gets used as a digestive
tablets,
tonic.
Yeah. They always tell me, like, when my voice is getting raspy because
Use
I
some
talk a
slippery
lot.
elm.
Yeah, use the slippery elm.
But it's finite. It's endangered a little bit. So sustainability is tougher with that one. But guess what? There's another great herbal option. Marshmallow root. Marshmallow root does the exact same thing. It's extremely ubiquitous. We've got it growing outside the Herbal Path in our Portsmouth location, right? And we can get the same effect when we use marshmallow as opposed to using slippery elm. So the sustainability and teaching different people about the ways of the plants is interwoven into our story. And that's why the echinacea is there. And I see echinacea and it just unleashes this cacophony of emotion for me, right? The color, the texture, the vibrance of it. It makes me think of the Herbal Path. It makes me think of helping other people walk the Herbal Path.
I like that, making other people walk the herbal path.
Mhm.
And that's that was obviously some thought went into that one, but I had missed it prior because that's really beautiful. Um, do you find are you finding that where we are at in the world, and there's a lot of changing to to top end structures of government and what's going on, and there's a lot of people who are nervous and whether we're studying this and how we're going to be studying this, and tons of people might lose their job, and all, there's a lot out there right now.
Mm.
There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of
Fear. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of fear.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious at how that has, as a pharmacist, as a business owner, as somebody who cares about the community. How are you? What do you think the future brings for us? Is this gonna is the world getting better? Are we is the herbal path? Is there going to be in the future? Are there going to be more people who have access to the herbal path and able to get it because that is what I truly think that we need, or is it going to be where that's not the case? And is the world
Mhm.
helping us go in that direction right now, or are we going in the opposite direction?
I think of it as a journey down a road. And down that road, you get to make choices, right? Directions you could go. But during this journey, we can't go back. So we know we can't go back to the past, but we can learn from it. We can envision the future. I envision a future where we have herbal wings in the hospital, where you have an herbalist on staff, a clinical herbalist, where you have therapeutic herbal teas being served when somebody is going through cancer treatment, right? Bringing this more into integration for people and increasing access to care, it's so important. Right now there's barriers, the cost barrier, because a lot of it isn't covered by insurance, accessibility, because there's a limited number of people who have our level of training, right? But I feel like we kind of owe it to people to provide this as healthcare providers, as healthcare practitioners, because we know that there's certain parts of herbalism that really work, that could be helpful. So we need to bring it more to the forefront. So what do I envision? I envision this happening. I envision through the educational work that we're doing as a holistic community, that we're getting this mission out, that we're getting the vision out, and that people start to understand and seek it out. And patients are what is going to drive this change. It won't be providers. It won't be you and me. I would love it for it to be you and me. But in order to get the numbers behind a real change, you need the masses, you need the people. And I'm seeing it even in the CEs that I'm taking, continuing education credits, where they talk about natural medicine now not as hocus pocus. They talk about it as, oh, this might be a legitimate option for certain characteristics, right?
Oh, I need to get my hands on some notes.
And, but that is a paradigm shift. So I see the paradigm shifting. Everyone comes to this field in their own way, right? Nobody can be forced to do something. So it's more about choice. It's accessibility, it's choice. And through the public's outcry for more choice and more options, that's where the herbal path and the way that we're going, it will shine. Now, that's the vision that I have for the future, a place of accessibility, of inclusion and care. But the reality is, there's almost zero I can do to control any of that. It's not about control. What we do today will directly impact the future, will directly impact tomorrow, the present moment. This is what matters. This is all we have, right? One of the great Persian poets, Rumi, said this moment is your life, right? And that's really what we have. So how do we take this present moment and do something meaningful with it? And I think the level of education that you're doing, I think what we're doing, it's in some small way contributing to the change in perception and the change in awareness for what we do. Awareness is so important. That is probably the most important thing that the Herbal Path does, is spread awareness about herbs, about these traditional remedies. Some of these remedies we've used for more than 2,700 years, in some cases longer, right? But again, we're getting this out to the public and helping them understand that, you know what, this path exists. It's your choice. You can choose it. You don't have to, right? But I see this vision of offering more opportunity for people, of offering more optionality for people. And I really think that it could happen and it could radically change the direction of medicine. But the public has to be the ones. They're going to be the ones that will choose, that will be the voice. And then what are we doing? We're there. We need to spread awareness. We need to help them. And that's kind of what I envision our mission as being, if that makes sense.
And it makes perfect sense to me because I saw, and I want to go down this path just for a second here. Acupuncture, massage, these are something that now you can go and get covered by your insurance. You can go to MGB, you can go to Wentworth Douglas, the hospital that's right down the street from you. And if you seek this out, you can get that. When 10 years ago, that was not the case. If you went to your, 5 years ago, even maybe, if you went to your practitioner and your physician and said that I need massage, or I think acupuncture would help me, they would say, okay, fine, go pay for it on your own, figure it out on your own, find a practitioner on your own. That's not the case anymore. Now they'll call you and set you up for an acupuncture appointment. And this is where I do get a little bit nervous because the stewards, right now, the people who are carrying this knowledge forward are under your care in a small local business, which is amazing. And everybody is doing it together. When we do take those bigger systems, I see an acupuncturist through MGB, and she is incredible. She's an amazing acupuncturist, as knowledgeable as as knowledgeable as they come. I know that, and same with the massage therapist that I've seen through MGB, and that's been and to be honest, that was a experience that I thought wasn't going to be the case. I thought it was going to be quick and going to be, let's just, the cookie cutter model, because we know that MGB, Mass General Brigham, is a massive corporation, and they do, even though it's, technically nonprofit, there's still a lot of forces to play that are trying to, make things that maybe aren't the best for patient. And it's just to create that cookie cutter model. So I as much as, yes, that is what we want, where the insurance company, or not the insurance company, where a person who has cancer can get, herbal teas, and because that would create a paradigm shift, like you're saying, because once they saw it and once it was in medicine, they would see how much more, the benefit and the consistency to it. We could study it way more. It would just be, around, accessible. Adoption would happen.
Yes.
But I get nervous if I was driving down the street and I drove past the Herbal Path, and it was no longer the Herbal Path, and it was, it was Wentworth Douglas, Wentworth Douglas Herbery. I would,
which might happen, but this is why we need the herbalists involved, because their whole training is very different than you and me. Like we're trained very much in that conventional medical model, the allopathic model, which is great in a way. It helps us understand pathophysiology really well. We understand disease, we understand therapeutics and all that. But to understand the way, the intention, the methodology of a practice, why they do what they do, there's a lot of training on that for an herbalist. The power of intention, the power of practice, how to set up a practice, right? How to be community driven. There's a lot of community focus, right? I think that if this initiative is more community driven and community focused, you start to eliminate the overarching big corporation, because it's more about that small independent that you've got. And yeah, they follow certain rules, right? But they're more independent to be able to have those conversations, because those conversations matter. And if the insurances were governed more by clinical outcomes and less by, the chronic disease, having to slap a label on something or diagnosis code, but if it were more about the outcome, right? Like, how do we help this person get better to live a higher quality life? That might involve, like you said, love, compassion, discussion, having conversations, meaningful connections with people, and having more of a community-based approach to herbalism that would run almost in opposition a bit to conventional medicine, but maybe conventional medicine could adopt some of these principles as well. So what I'm envisioning is not a large corporation governing and taking over. I think you're right. I think it is something to guard against. But the way I see the practitioners being that I've worked with, people like yourself, some of these great herbalists, some of the yogis and gurus and acupuncturists that are out there, they're so community focused that I think we've got the right people, we've got the right community. Let's make something happen. Let's go the distance.
Yeah, I can feel that. And it's just about empowering those people. It's about empowering those people and listening to them and making sure that they have a path forward to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of a story here. There's this unbelievable, he's a trained chiropractor, and he does traditional Lakota Native American sweat lodges. Mm-hmm. And I had the blessing to do a sweat lodge with him last year. And afterwards, we're just a beautiful ceremony, and we're walking out and walking through what I would assume was grass, right? I'm assuming it's just grass. It's just, there's some stuff. And he points down, he says, "Oh, it's plantain." And you mentioned plantain earlier.
Yes.
And he told me how I could take this plantain, something that I didn't think was edible at all or whatever, and I can go make myself a salad. And it's going to be good for me.
It's delicious.
It's delicious. It's going to be great for your liver. Like, go do it. Go do it right now. And people like that is who I would like to see empowered. You're herbalists. I'd like to see empowered. I just know that we were indoctrinated in school. That was a thing. As much as I can defend our learning and that it's great to learn the way that we did, there was also indoctrination there as well, I feel, because the pharmaceutical companies are, they have skin in the game, and they want us to prescribe their drugs, and they fund some of our education. And, some of the stuff that was probably going on in the back, the back rooms is probably not great. And also it's not like smoking a cigar bad, where they're like, making these decisions to harm these students. It's just like, oh no, this is going to make our company more money, and it's going to make your company more money, and we're not thinking about humanity. So I don't want that to happen with any of the teachings. I hope that this gentleman can teach the herbalist, and your herbalist can teach new herbalists. And sure, there's some type of, licensure. I don't know. There's such a balance, right? We need regulation where you have people who are trained, and that there's not, you're not going to somebody who doesn't have the ability to help you. And there's some type of system in place that tells us that, but then something that doesn't prevent people from being able to go towards this and practice this, and saying like, hey, if I want to be an herbalist, I can do it today. I can start learning today by finding another herbalist in my community and learning with them. I think that is the way through.
I agree with you. I think a great place to go for people if they're curious about what does it mean to be an herbalist, besides the Herbal Path, right, would be Misty Meadows. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but that's another place that has like a lot of kind of a special place in my heart, because as a student, I got to go there with Greg, the pharmacist, right? He took me there.
Is Greg still with us?
No, he passed.
Well, he's with us. He's here.
He is with us.
Yeah, he's here today. Yeah, giddy up, Greg.
So he took me, and he introduced me to the people at Misty Meadows. This is in Lee. It's an educational herb farm, and they grow all sorts of different herbs. So if you want to see ashwagandha, you can see it. If you want to see calendula, you can see it. If you want to see mullein, you can see it. But the proprietor there is like the epitome of a really good community herbalist, right? Wendy Fogg is someone who I have an enormous amount of respect for, because for her, it's all about the plants. But she has the processes too. The drying, it's all CGMP, it's all regulated. She blends the two perfectly. And I think that if you want to see, like, what does the gold standard look like? That's it. Because she's bringing these traditional ways to the forefront and teaching people. But there's also we need that lot number with that particular preparation at this particular time. You have the perfect melding, right? If you would.
Thank you for that. And please, I feel like I've said to you, you can introduce me to this person, but no, guys, we're getting Wendy Fogg on the show. Misty Meadows. We're going to go to the farm. We're going to learn about herbs. We're going to, we'll bring our camera. We're going to get into it a little bit. That's so cool.
I think it would be. I think that that's part of where the joy of this field comes in. Sharing, connecting, learning, right? And there is this sense you come out of it feeling invigorated. You come out of it feeling empowered. And that's the path that we're on, right? Both of us. And so many of the providers around us as well.
Yeah, it's you before the show started, you had mentioned some of the art that we have around here and how it had reminded you of chemical structures from school, and we have a bunch of hexagonal shapes around here around the studio, and it's just the structure, the strength, and how we're all going to build up together. That's what that reminds me of. And John, I could talk to you for 5 hours, and I think that's at some point we are going to do that, and we're gonna we can get down to some
immunology, right?
The immunology, exactly. We'll do a couple of lectures, together where we can learn and maybe even a series about the some of the stuff and some of the herb stuff that you're doing, and some collaborations with Misty Meadows and Wendy Fogg over there would be great. Where can the people find you if they want to find you, if they want to find the Herbal Path? How can they get in contact with you?
I would say one way to do it would be, herbalpath.com. We do have a website. It's pretty rudimentary, but all of our information is there. We have 2 stores, one in Portsmouth and one in Dover. And I tend to be more in Dover. I would say if you're looking to have a really good conversation about pharmacy and plants and the world around us, please, by all means, seek me out. But if you're looking for help and there's a level of support that's needed, there are people that are working at the Herbal Path right now that can run rings around me with their understanding of plants and the environment. And those people are very accessible too. So I think coming into the store, seeing what we're all about, going onto the website, seeing what we're all about would be the first step. And then, depending upon what you're seeking, we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, that sounds beautiful. I think everybody go and have that somatic experience that John had the first time that he walked into the Herbal Path back in, when was it, John?
Yeah, so 2013.
In 2013, go back and have that go in there and have that experience, and see how different it is than a pharmacy, see how different it is than any medical institution that you've ever walked into, how warm, inviting it is. Brother, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I appreciate you so much. Guys.
Same.
Yeah,
feeling is mutual.
Hey, giddy up. And guys, please subscribe to the show, because it's so important to do so. It helps me continue to do this. It helps me bring, the life and the love to our community. So please subscribe to Dr. BeeWell. Get over to the Herbal Path. Get some medicine in your body. Giddy up. We'll see you next time.